What would you invest in if everything could be taken away from you? For millions throughout history, forced to flee their country, their home, this wasn't a hypothetical. This chart might explain the answer. It shows the average years of schooling around the world, broken down by religion. On average, Jewish people are more educated than any other major group, and by quite a lot. Of course, this isn't the whole story. Partly it's because most Jewish people live in two economically developed countries with already high levels of education. But even outside these countries, we see a similar trend. The explanation for this might be, when people are forced to flee war, famine, persecution, they start investing more in the one thing they can actually carry with them anywhere: education. In economics, this theory is called the uprootedness hypothesis. The idea is simple. When land and property can be taken, people invest in education instead. And Jews are a prime example. They face persecution throughout their history, forced to flee time and time again. Maybe it's this history which explains the high levels of education today. But is this theory correct? Could the forced migration of people really have such long-lasting effects? Well, a group of economists found a way they could actually test this idea. In the aftermath of World War II, once Nazi Germany was defeated, new borders were drawn up across Europe. In the interwar years, Poland's borders looked like this. But in 1945, the Kresy region was taken over by the USSR. Millions of Poles were forced to move, and they resettled largely in the newly acquired Western territories, from which Germans were expelled.
2 million Polish people were expelled from the Polish East. So these 2 million people were resettled, and they were meant to move in the formerly German territories, and 75% of them did so.
That's economic historian Sascha Becker, and he, along with his co-authors, thought this historical context might be the perfect way to test this uprootedness hypothesis. See, this border change created three groups of people. The first group, the forced migrants, made to leave Kresy and move to the new territories. Second, the voluntary migrants, who chose to move from the centre of Poland to the Western territories. And third, the non-movers, who lived all across Poland and didn't leave at all. What's key is that all these people shared a number of traits.
These are all Polish people, they are all Polish ethnicity, they are all Catholics. So they are homogeneous on so many dimensions, but it's really one group has a history of forced migration and the other two groups don't.
Now, all the economists had to do was look at the level of education of the descendants of these groups today, and they could start to see if the hypothesis was true. These two charts start to explain what they found. The first one shows education levels in Poland pre-World War II, before millions were forced to migrate. Notice that those living in central Poland had higher literacy rates than those living in the Kresy region. In other words, the people in Kresy were less educated. Now look at the second chart, which shows the same thing but for people today. And we see something striking. Those with relatives from Kresy have much higher levels of education today compared to the average.
We can compare the education of the generation of movers and of the kids and grandchildren decades later and see whether the forced migrants are indeed more educated, and we find that they are.
But why was this the case? What was the mechanism?
People whose ancestors were forced to migrate, they have it in their DNA, so to say, that this happened once, that our family was forced to migrate. It could happen again. We need to be prepared. Front of their head that this is a direct consequence of what they just experienced, and that education has moved up on their importance scale.
It wasn't anything in their genes, but the descendants of those who experienced misery and hardship changed what they valued. Over material possessions, they began to cherish education as something which could never be taken away from them. Thank you to Sascha Becker for his support as part of this project. Please watch further videos in our series delivered by Discover Economics and Cage Research Centre. Please visit our website and follow us on social media.